All right. Ready to dive into a topic that I think we've all heard about, probably even debated a few times? Diversity in the workplace.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a hot topic.
It is, it is. And today we're really going to go deeper than just that simple more diversity equals more profits kind of argument. We're going to be taking a look at excerpts from a Harvard Business Review article, Getting Serious About Diversity by Robin J. Ely and David A. Thomas. And I got to say, some of their findings might surprise you.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because there really is a lot more to it than just kind of those simple numbers.
Absolutely.
The article really digs into those common assumptions that we see all the time, the ones that say like, oh, if you just get more women on boards or just have a more diverse workforce, profits are just going to magically like shoot up.
Yeah. Yeah, we've all seen those headlines, especially about like women on boards, that kind of thing. But what's the reality? What does the research actually say?
Well, it turns out the research doesn't really, directly back up that simple equation. Some studies might show a correlation between, diversity and financial performance.
Right.
But that doesn't actually mean that one directly causes the other.
Mhm.
If you think about it, a lot of these board decisions are often operating at like a really high level.
Mm-hmm.
And their impact on the bottom line, like on profits, it might not even be immediate, or even direct.
So just adding diverse individuals to a team or board without changing kind of the underlying company culture isn't going to automatically lead to those big jumps in profit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Illy and Thomas, they actually make this really compelling case that simply focusing on those numbers, just trying to hit certain quotas,
Well,
can actually really miss the mark. They propose what they call a learning and effectiveness paradigm. And this is where they really shift the focus to how an organization can use its diversity to actually promote learning and growth.
so it's not just about ticking those boxes, it's about actually making those diverse perspectives count, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, research actually does show that diversity actually can lead to some like real tangible improvements. Like we see it in better decision making. We see it in higher team satisfaction, even, higher work quality.
Mm-hmm.
But the real question is, how do organizations actually, tap into that potential? How do they actually make it work?
That is a great question. And luckily, the article actually gives us a little roadmap. They outline 4 key actions that leaders can take to actually cultivate this kind of learning-oriented culture. And the first one, well, it seems pretty basic, right? Building trust.
Yeah, on the surface, it definitely sounds pretty straightforward,
Right.
but it actually goes a lot deeper than just like, being inclusive,
Mm.
having a diverse group of people.
Right.
It's about really creating a workplace where people, no matter their background, they feel psychologically safe to actually express themselves.
Yeah.
Even when their opinions or experiences might be different from the kind of the majority.
Yeah.
And actually, the article highlights this really interesting story about this is a white senior partner at a firm, and he wanted to address kind of the racial unrest that was happening in the country.
Okay.
But he knew that he didn't have all the answers. Right. So he actually invited his entire team, people from all different backgrounds, to come together and just share their perspectives openly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that vulnerability, that willingness to just kind of, admit that he didn't have all the answers.
Right.
That was actually key to building trust with his team.
That makes a lot of sense. Being open to learning from others, acknowledging your own limitations can really open up that space for, honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that willingness to listen and learn from, people with different experiences, that's crucial. And that actually leads us to their second action, which, honestly, this one is even more challenging, and that's actively working against discrimination and subordination.
So we're really getting into like the systemic issues here, like tackling that stuff that's below the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where a lot of like those traditional diversity initiatives, they kind of stumble, right?
Yeah.
Because they might focus on those like, surface level changes without actually addressing, like you said, those deeper, kind of ingrained patterns of inequality.
So it's not just about good intentions, it's about concrete action.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example? What does this look like in a company?
Yeah, so they mentioned this consulting firm, and they were struggling. They had high turnover rates, especially among women and people of color. And when they really kind of dug into it, they realized that their project assignment practices, they were actually unintentionally biased.
Okay.
Like all the high-profile projects were consistently going to, the white men in the firm.
Right.
While, other employees, they were kind of stuck with more routine tasks.
Oh, I see.
And it wasn't like anyone was being malicious. It was just, kind of the way things had always been done.
The status quo.
Exactly, exactly,
So an example of unconscious bias kind of playing out in the workplace.
exactly.
So what did they do to change that?
Well, they actually took a really interesting approach. They decided to actually challenge their own assumptions, the way they had always done things.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a conscious effort to actually provide, more challenging assignments, more coaching to employees that they may have previously overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found was they actually had a much larger pool of talent than they had originally perceived.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is.
That's a great example of how that kind of systemic change can actually lead to those real, concrete results.
Yeah.
So far we've got building trust, addressing discrimination. What's the third action?
So the third one really focuses on embracing a wide range of styles and voices.
Okay.
Every workplace, it has its own kind of like unwritten rules
Mm-hmm.
about communication and behavior.
Right.
And often these rules, they favor certain styles over others.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that could create barriers for people from different backgrounds, like what are some of those subtle biases that we're talking about here?
Well, think about, a black man being told to smile more, to
Yeah.
appear, less threatening, or a Latina being told to, tone it down because her passion is perceived as aggressive.
Right, right.
These are subtle, but they're powerful messages that actually tell people to, kind of suppress parts of themselves
Right.
just to fit in.
So they can't bring their full selves to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's definitely problematic. How can organizations overcome this?
Well, leaders, they really need to actually actively challenge those unspoken norms
Mm-hmm.
and create systems that are based on, the actual job requirements, not on these subjective perceptions of how people should behave.
So judging people on their work and not necessarily on their personality or how well they conform.
Exactly.
It makes sense. So we've talked about building trust, addressing discrimination, embracing different styles. What's that fourth piece of the puzzle?
All right, so the fourth one, and I think this is maybe the most exciting one, is making cultural differences a resource for learning.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
It's about seeing those differences not as obstacles, but as like a source of insight.
exactly.
That's great.
But there's a catch.
Okay.
This only really works after those first three actions are in place.
Okay. Makes sense.
You can't expect people to openly share their experiences and ideas if they don't feel safe and respected and valued.
Right. You need that strong foundation
Ex-
of trust and equality.
Exactly.
Okay. So once you have that, then how do you actually, put this learning from differences into practice? How does that look?
Well, leaders can encourage, open discussions about how people's identities, how their background, how their experiences
Mhm.
actually shape the way they see the world, both inside and outside the company.
Right.
And they can actually use those experiences to improve, the organization's work and its culture.
So are there any examples of how this has worked in real world situations?
Yeah, actually, the article highlights this fascinating research by Boris Kreuzberg,
Okay.
and he was looking at Wall Street analysts.
Mm-hmm.
And what he found was, unlike men, women analysts actually performed better
Oh, wow.
after switching firms.
Okay.
And the reason for this was because they had to kind of build their network and their reputation outside of their firm because they often faced, discrimination internally.
I see.
So this actually forced them to be more adaptable, more resilient.
So facing discrimination actually forced them to develop skills that made them more successful.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange
Yeah.
thing, but it's true. And actually, there's more to the story. A research director at one firm, he actually used this insight to create a more supportive culture specifically for women analysts.
Okay.
He encouraged them to develop their own styles and voices,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, his entire research department, they actually thrived.
Wow.
They went from like ranking 15th to first in their industry.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing example.
It seems like creating that right environment really allows those women's talents to shine.
Exactly. And that's really the power of embracing diversity as a resource for learning. It can really lead to some amazing results.
This is already so eye-opening, and we're just getting started.
It's easy to get kind of caught up in the practicalities of how to actually build this kind of culture. But Ely and Thomas, they also kind of challenge us to think about the bigger picture here.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. What's that deeper message they're sending?
Well, they argue that when we only focus on the business case for diversity, like on how it might impact profits,
Yeah, right.
we're actually kind of undervaluing the inherent worth of each individual.
Yeah, it's almost like we're putting a price tag on equality and dignity
Exactly.
and reducing people to their you know, potential economic contribution.
Yeah, and that creates this kind of transactional relationship
Right.
instead of one that's built on like genuine respect and appreciation for those differences.
So they're saying that creating a truly inclusive organization, it goes beyond just like chasing those profits, right?
Hmm.
It's about building a workplace where everyone feels the sense of belonging, where they can actually, contribute their unique talents and reach their full potential.
Precisely. It requires a shift from that purely economic mindset to one that actually values diversity for its own sake.
It makes you wonder, like, what kind of organization do we actually want to be a part of, right?
Right.
One that sees diversity as a means to an end, or one that sees it as like a fundamental value.
That's a crucial question for all of us to consider, I think, both individually and collectively.
Yeah, for sure. This whole conversation actually reminds me of something I was reading recently. It was about the kind of the limitations of that business case argument. And the author argued that when we frame diversity solely in terms of those economic benefits, we actually undermine the moral imperative for equality.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we rely too heavily on that business case, diversity initiatives just become this thing that you pursue when it's profitable and then you abandon it when it's not.
Right. It becomes this short-sighted strategy that
Yeah,
can be incredibly damaging, both
absolutely.
for, individuals and for society as a whole.
Yeah, and it overlooks the real costs of inequality,
Yeah.
both economic and social. Discrimination, prejudice, lack of opportunity, these things, they hold entire groups of people back.
Right.
They prevent them from fully contributing to their communities and to the economy.
Yeah. So it seems like the real challenge here is to kind of move beyond this narrow view of diversity and embrace a broader vision of what it means to create a truly equitable and just society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to shift from seeing diversity as a problem to be solved to seeing it as a source of strength and innovation.
Yeah, it's almost like rewiring our brains to see the world through a different lens, one that actually recognizes the inherent value of every
Yes,
individual,
exactly.
regardless of their background.
Yeah, and that's not easy, right? It
Yeah.
requires us to confront our own biases, challenge the status quo, be willing to do the hard work of building a more just and equitable world.
I was also thinking about, the role of leadership in this and driving this kind of change.
Oh yeah, leadership is absolutely critical.
Right.
Leaders set the tone,
Yeah.
they create the culture, they model the behaviors that they want to see in their organizations.
But it's not just about that top-down leadership, right?
Right.
It seems like everyone has a responsibility to contribute to a more inclusive workplace.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility where everyone feels empowered to speak up against injustice, to challenge bias, to advocate for change.
It sounds like building a truly diverse and inclusive organization, it's a collective effort
Mm,
that requires commitment from everyone.
yeah, you got it. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels like they belong, where their voices are heard, and where their contributions are truly valued.
So if we're moving beyond that simplistic business case, what's the new paradigm? What does getting serious about diversity actually look like in the 21st century?
It's about recognizing that diversity isn't just about numbers or quotas. It's about creating a culture of learning and equality.
And that's a much bigger challenge
Right.
than simply just hiring more women or people of color, right?
Yeah.
It requires this deep commitment to challenging the status quo and building a more just and equitable world.
It means being willing to have those difficult conversations, to confront our own biases, and to do the hard work of creating a workplace where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
And it means recognizing that diversity isn't a destination, it's a journey that requires constant learning, reflection, and adaptation.
So as you think about your own workplace or the organizations you interact with, what are the opportunities to move beyond that simplistic business case?
Where can you see the potential for embracing the deeper value of diverse perspectives? What steps, even small ones, can you take to contribute to a more inclusive and equitable environment? Remember, change starts with each of us.
And by working together, we can create organizations and communities that actually reflect the richness and diversity of human experience.
That's a powerful thought to carry with us.
It really feels like we've uncovered like a whole new way of thinking about diversity.
Yeah, one that moves beyond just like the surface level, right?
Yeah.
And really challenges us to consider those deeper implications of what it actually means to create a truly inclusive workplace.
And you know what's really interesting about this learning and effectiveness paradigm
Yeah.
is that it actually benefits everyone,
Oh, interesting.
not just those from, underrepresented groups.
That's a really crucial point.
Yeah,
It's not about creating like a winner and loser situation here.
exactly.
It's about building a system where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Exactly. When we create that culture of learning and equality,
Right.
we actually unlock the full potential of each individual.
Mm.
And that leads to better decisions, more innovation, a stronger sense of community overall.
It really is a case of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Precisely. When we tap into those diverse talents and perspectives
Yeah.
of our workforce, we create something truly extraordinary.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What can you actually take away from this deep dive into, the complexities of diversity?
Well, I think the most important takeaway here is that true diversity, it's about so much more than just numbers.
Mhm.
It's about fostering a culture where everyone, and I mean everyone, feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute their best.
And that requires us to move beyond, those simplistic solutions
Okay.
and embrace a much more kind of nuanced and holistic approach.
It means being willing to challenge our own assumptions, to have those difficult conversations, and to actually do the hard work of building a more just and equitable workplace.
And recognizing that diversity is not like a destination, right?
Right.
It's a journey.
It is.
It's a journey of continuous learning, reflection, and growth.
So as you go about your day-to-day, think about your own workplace, the organizations you interact with.
Where do you see those opportunities to move beyond that simple business case for diversity? And how can we embrace that deeper value of different perspectives?
What steps, no matter how small, can you take to contribute to a more inclusive and equitable environment?
Remember, change really does start with each of us. And by working together, we can create organizations and communities that truly reflect, that incredible richness and diversity of the human experience.
That's a powerful note to end on.
It is.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep challenging that status quo.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.